Hi everyone, Dave here at East Rosebud Fly and Tackle in Billings, Montana. Today I'm going to tie for you a Charlie Craven pattern he calls the Muggly Caddis. He actually lists two different ones. In his Charlie's Fly box, this is a pattern that he describes using snowshoe foot hair for the underwing. On his website he describes a different one using CDC as the underwing. I've already tied for you a CDC and elk hair caddis, so we're going to go with the snowshoe just to show you how to work with it. It's a little hard, but it's good material. As you can see, it has a nice profile, nice bulk to it with minimal weight, and it takes floating very well. This is really just an offshoot of the elk hair caddis. This particular fly, because it does not have a palmered hackle like the elk hair, will sit very low in the water. It's a lot like Craig Matthews' X-Caddis. His X-Caddis has a trailing sparkle shuck behind it, but it too sits very low in the water. And I think this is the key for trout. They don't want to come to the surface to grab an insect that might jump away at any second, so this shows an insect that either is trapped in the surface film or not quite ready to emerge. So it can be a very effective pattern. So what I'm using is a TMC 100 SPBL hook, size 14. This hook has a 1.5 wide gap, which is why I'm using it. And we're using Vivus 6/0 brown thread. So to preserve head space for our wing tie down, start the thread at about the 75% point. And just wrap a nice smooth thread base all the way to the end of the shank. And since we're going to be dubbing this thread, I always like to bring my thread forward. You can't dub tightly right up against the hook shank. So this way, when I have my thread dubbed, I bring my thread back and the dubbing starts where I want it to start instead of having excess thread wraps. The dubbing that we're using is Whitlock's, Dave Whitlock's, and this is the brown stone dubbing. Really has a nice color and texture to it. And it's a nice rough dubbing. We want this to be kind of buggy. So I'm going to dub this a little more heavily than I normally would. We want to pick some of this out a little bit to also help float this fly and to trap some air bubbles underneath it. Get that tightened up. Alright, so like I say, what I can do now is I just make a couple of thread wraps, big wraps back, so that my dubbing starts right at the end of the shank where I want it. And we'll dub kind of a tapered body, a little heavier at the front. Caddis are shaped this way, plus it helps to set our wings so they don't flare quite so badly. Oh, there we go. And we want our thread again to stop at about the 75% point. Now we have to have a thread base, of course, before we tie anything on the hook if we don't want it to slide. Now what I'm using is just natural colored snowshoe rabbit foot, available in a variety of dyed colors. What you want to do first is snip off some of the short hair at the edge so that you can get to the actual foot pad itself. The hair is longest here, and we're going to need all the length we can get. Just like deer hair, you just separate out the small section that you want before you clip it off. We don't need a lot here. And clip it off as close to the foot as you can to get the maximum length. Alright, so here's what I have. This is the long hairs, this is the underfur down here. I'm going to pick some of that short underfur off just to reduce the tie-in bulk, because it is rather bulky to tie in and we don't need a lot of it. It will thin out those under hairs. Alright, we want the long hair to be about twice hook shank length, because we're going to tie it in and then fold it back. So it's important that we have enough to fold back. Right at the end of the abdomen, I'm going to make 2 thread wraps. Pull it up tight to really bind that hair down, and simply going to grab the front hair and bring it back. A couple of wraps right over that fold-in point. So like I said, you can see it's fairly bulky right there. I think it's a good idea to apply just a little bit of head cement to that before we go any further. I don't use a lot of cement on my flies, but I think this is a good precautionary idea. And then I'm going to just taper that a little bit with thread so I don't have quite as much of a hump when I tie in my overwing. The overwing is just deer hair. I'm just using white-tailed deer. We don't need a lot of it. As always, clean out your underfur. Hold your tips about 1/3 of the way down from the tips, and either use your fingers or a hair comb or the combination of both, and clean that out good. Then we'll stack it tip first. In a dry winter type of environment, very often our homes have very low humidity. The hair absorbs quite a little bit of static electricity and wants to go everywhere on you. If that happens, there's a couple of different things you can do. One, you can just get some static guard, spray your hair before you use it, or you can use a dryer fabric sheet and rub it on the hair, and that takes a lot of the static off as well. Alright, so I have a small clump of stacked deer hair. We want the tips to be just a little bit shorter than the underwing. We'll hold it there firmly. Again, 2 thread wraps, one on top of the other, then we're going to pull it straight up. This will help keep the wing from wanting to spin on us. And you wrap through the butts, kind of taper that ledge, and then snip these off as close as we can. As you can see, I'm still holding my wing to try to keep it from getting confused with the butts. Turn the hook over, trim the bottom side. Alright, I'll bring my thread forward through those butts, trap them and slim them, and you can see I've made kind of a tapered head there. And a little more dubbing. Start right in front of our wing. I'll keep that propped back, and end with a whip finish. Now the last thing you want to do is kind of pick this dubbing out a little bit. There's a lot of different ways you can do it, but this is good scraggly dubbing, and like I say, it helps to also trap air bubbles underneath the fly. We'll pick that out a little bit. And there you go. If you haven't used snowshoe rabbit foot, give it a try. It's an interesting material. Gives a nice profile, like I said, with very, very little bulk. It also holds fly floating very well. As always, thanks for joining us. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to contact us. We'll see you next time.